and you know, my childhood hanging with Bam and all those guys. I mean, it was like, I was like, oh, this is great. Yeah, I'd love to be a part of this. So
Yeah, wasn't it an Addio Shoes video that you and Tony Hawk had a double part and Bam had a part in the same video?
Yeah. Well, we would go on tour together in like the bus, and it was rowdy. I mean, we talked about the docuseries on Max called The Last Run, but there's footage of that tour in there where like those guys definitely like broke me into the skateboarding. Like they're like, it ain't gonna be easy. We're gonna like, you know, the hazing, the like,
I
but
can't
in a fun way. But it was you know, a rowdy tour.
I can't imagine Tony Hawk gets rowdy.
You know, at the time, you know, he had kind of the weight of the world on his shoulders because he was like carrying the tour. You know, his name's on the bus. He's got the game coming out. You know, there's a lot of pressure.
Was that before the game? No, it couldn't have been before
No, but you know, game number
what
2
year
or
was
3
that?
or whatever at this point. I'm trying to remember. I know it was a rarity.
02,
and I was
03?
Yeah,
Maybe
I was
like 01, 02.
Yeah, because my mom let me go solo. And that was a big deal.
How old
She's
were
like,
you?
well, I trust Tony Hawk. And he's got a kid, so he's not going to like, you know, she had trust. So I was probably like, gosh, I got to say like 13 or 14 maybe.
Right.
Yeah. And it was like, you know, just watching, you know, those skaters go town to town and just tear it up. And like, not only the skating was insane, but just like they would go out at night. You know, I'm getting a glimpse of like this kind of like rock and roll sort of tour lifestyle at a young age going, wow, this is, and cause the snowboarders, I feel like we're a bit more buttoned up. But the skaters, at least in my eyes, yeah. Or maybe I was just with my mom for most of the, you know, my parents, my dad, and whatnot. But yeah, it was like, okay, wow, this was super fun. But yeah, that was a wild time for sure.
I think that your skateboarding is criminally overlooked in a lot of sense, because I remember that Addio video.
Yeah.
And it was like was that like your? I mean, it was certainly your introduction to me. It was the first time I heard about you. You were doing, I remember 720s for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
you won a couple golds at X Games, right?
Yeah, I mean, I remember Tony being pissed because I learned a 720 before a 540. He's like, "It's not how you got. It's not how you do it. You got to start here. You got to, you know, like, well, it just worked better."
and do I remember that it was like a method 720 that made it different? Like,
yeah, because of snowboarding, I knew spins and big airs and stuff like that. Because the half pipe's like 22 feet tall. When you bump it down to like a 13-foot vert ramp, you're like, oh my god, this is tiny. Feels tiny.
Right.
And so you get, you know, me being comfortable in the air. And so I always said that like my snowboarding brought my skateboarding the size and just the magnitude of it, you know, big jumps. So we hit a jump on a skateboard. It's maybe like, it's like a 12-foot gap, you know, snowboarding's like a 90-foot jump. Huge, you know,
right?
Yeah,
in an Arctic blizzard, you know, and then I feel like skateboarding brought my snowboarding like the technical aspect, like the precision. Because by the time I got to snow, I'm like, oh my god, the board's just gonna stay on my feet. What could be easier?
If you fall, you're falling on snow.
Yeah, well, it sounds comfy, but it's not. It's icy. It's icy. Yeah, those walls and conditions can get pretty brutal, or it can rain the night before, and it just turns into this frozen, like, it's rough.
So you found snowboarding a little bit more easy to progress in.
I found it easier from my overall sort of like, I just took to it right away. It was easier, but skateboarding was always that kind of unsung thing, and I'm glad you mentioned that my skate career kind of got overlooked, because that was really hard in the documentary, because we were trying to balance like, well, how much skate, how much snow, and I was like, man, you guys we're harping really hard on the Olympics and the snow stuff, but there were like a solid 9 years there where I would hang up the snowboard and go be at the top 3 at every single skate competition for, you know, that period of time. That was a big chunk of time, and now I see people on Instagram. Who was it? It was Tony or Andy Mack posted something. He's like, this was like one of the heydays of vert skating. It was a clip of me winning one of the Do Tour events. And the comment below is like, dude, it's got the same name as that snowboard guy. That's so weird. Like, like, no, dude, that's me. But it was a good time.
And was it always vert skating, or like when you were on the like the Boom Boom Huck Jam Tony Hawk tour, were you hitting the street course?
I would a little bit. I got a funny story of when I skated street, because when my first introduction was to ramps. Like, I had a YMCA nearby that Tony would frequent, the Encinitas. Yeah, it was a legendary place. And so I just got introduced to that right away, and street skating wasn't really as exciting. It seemed, more redundant and technical and like repetitive. Like, I'm just going to try this kickflip in the street over and over and over. Where the ramps, I'm like, oh man, I can launch something, I can grind. And there's just like a whole park designated for it. And so I really took to that. And then my buddies are like, come skate street with us. I'm like, sure. At this point, I'd used pads my whole life. So and we show up, to this street spot. It's like a 4 or 5 stair drop. And all I remember is going, okay, cool. And I ollie this thing or try to kickflip this thing, and I'm not going to make it. So instinctively, I go into a knee slide. I jumped a 5-foot stair thing onto my knees, and probably in shorts, and everyone looked at me like, oh my God, why would you do that? Why? I'm just like, knees are bleeding. I'm like, I'm just going to go home.
That's crazy.
It's just embedded in my brain to knee slide in a panic situation. So that kind of ended my street career pretty quickly.
Do you like shopping on Amazon? I do. And good news is, Steve-O's butt wipes for your butthole are available on Amazon. And if you want a real bundle of a deal, you can get Steve-O's hot sauce for your butthole, plus Steve-O's butthole destroyer, and Steve-O's butt wipes for your butthole. It's the butthole bundle, available on Amazon right now.
Yeah, dude.